the fear that wakes you up at 2 a.m. I know people who've had previous having a second baby might wake up in the middle of the night and they have this tightening in their tummy and they think, oh, now I remember what it's like. And they dig their husband in the ribs and say, I'm frightened. And he says, it'll be all right, and turns over and goes back to sleep. It's that sort of fear. And you can remember, you don't totally forget what fear you had, but it certainly takes the sting out of it and the power out of it. And it's no longer the focus of your subconscious mind.
Welcome to the Birth Agni podcast, the fire that births us and transforms us. This is a space where women reclaim birth on their own terms, where deep ancient knowing meets primal courage. We talk birth, womanhood, breastfeeding, parenting, and the quiet power of choosing differently. Choosing of our own. Come as you are, leave more rooted. I'm Divya Kapoor, a childbirth educator, lactation counselor, trainee traditional midwife, and doula, disintegrating the politics of birth, one story at a time. Today's guest must be a very familiar face for you if you already follow the birth world closely. Katharine Graves, internationally recognized expert on hypnobirthing, founder of the KGhyp Hypnobirthing, author of the Hypnobirthing Book. She's trained hundreds of women to have empowering and positive births. She also trains hypnobirthing experts across the world with her formula, devised over 2 decades of supporting women in birth. Today we explore the power of mind in birth and the role of fear and ways we can overcome it before birth. Let's dive into it. Hello, Katharine. I'm so glad to have you. I've been following you for quite some time, and it's an honor to have you speak about hypnobirthing, about the aspect of fear in birth, which is something we all fear in so many ways. So,
not if we've done hypnobirthing, we don't.
Oh yes, you've been telling me that. So how do you see fear in hypnobirthing, and how do you personally see it?
When a midwife who has seen hundreds, thousands of births sees her first hypnobirthing birth, she cannot believe the difference. And women who have had perhaps a traumatic birth for their first birth and then do KG hypnobirthing for their second birth, they're the ones who truly understand the difference that it makes, because they have something to compare it with. Because we certainly can't promise a totally pain-free birth. That wouldn't be true, and it can't be done. Some people do have a totally pain-free birth, but everybody has a more comfortable birth, far more comfortable. If you think of pain as a long line, and at one end of the line you have the women who you see on the movies screaming and writhing around in agony, and at the other end of the line you have these women who have a perfectly comfortable birth. Everybody is naturally somewhere along this line. When they do the KG hypnobirthing course, it always moves them a good bit along this line. Some it moves right along to that line, and various things help that, but everybody it moves a good bit along the line.
Yeah. So do you think all fear can be worked up in labor? And pain, the fear of pain is one of the most outstanding fears that women have, especially for first-time moms.
Fear is such a powerful emotion, isn't it? And for a woman, she may be prepared to run a risk for herself, but she will never run a risk for her baby.
Yeah.
So if somebody makes her frightened for her baby, she'll do anything.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. Yeah, so how do women work with fear in pregnancy when they're preparing? And
fear is, the whole of our society programs us to be afraid. All the horror stories you have from other women program you to be afraid. The movies, the television program you to be afraid. So I even met a little girl who was 2, and she said, Mummy's going to have a baby and it's going to hurt. And she's 2. What will she be like by the time she's 20 or 30 and having her own babies? It's so deep. And of course, people are afraid of pain, quite rightly. Nobody wants pain. And the majority of women do have very painful births. There's no getting away from it. But the majority of women who have done KG hypnobirthing have far more comfortable births. And I think birth is always a powerful experience, but it doesn't have to be a painful experience. They're two different things. I remember I was teaching a class of couples, and a mother came into the class who'd had her baby about 3 months previously, came in with this lovely little baby to tell them about her experience. And when she walked in the room, everybody said, "Was it painful?" And she said, "I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say it wasn't painful."
Wow.
But I was amazed how powerful it was. And I thought this is really important to explain this to women, because these are some of the strongest muscles in the human body, working to absolute capacity. And if you expect to do a hypnobirthing course and you're going to sort of hop into a birth pool perhaps or whatever, and out pops your baby, it will not be like that. It is always powerful. And if you don't expect that, when you feel these muscles working powerfully, you think, "Oh, I didn't expect it to be like that." And then you tense up, and then it's painful.
Muscles tense up. And when you were talking about pain, often in some of the programs, and especially somewhere in the middle of, when I started off as a childbirth educator, somewhere in between, I was like, don't call it pain. And remember you wrote, when we were talking about this aspect, you said, it's not important to not call it pain. It's really how you think about it. So
I don't think it matters what you call it. If you've got pain, you might as well say you've got pain. We're not trying to pretend something doesn't exist, but does exist. I mean, goodness, a lot of women who come to my course, probably everybody, comes because they're afraid of pain. And they want to do something that mitigates the pain. And there's no two ways about it. Birth for most women is very painful. And it doesn't have to be, because I see that all the time. But people say, "I've done hypnobirthing," and they mean a great many different things. If a woman says, "Well, I did hypnobirthing, but it didn't work," I would like to ask her what she has done, because she might have just listened to an audio or something. To me, the full KG Hypnobirth course is the only full hypnobirthing, and it is a 12-hour course, which you can do online, so it's perfectly straightforward. You get the Hypnobirthing Book, which you can get in digital format. You can get it as an audio book. You can get it from Amazon. I'm not sure if Amazon works in India, but nevertheless, you can get it as an audio book, so that's quite straightforward.
your books are there as well. I looked up, they're there.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So the book was written as the handbook to the course. It reinforces what you've learnt, because you can't possibly remember everything that's been said in 12 hours.
Right.
So you do the course, you read the book, and you have 10 to 15 minutes a day practice. And that's the really important thing. It's a 10 to 15 minutes a day practice that gradually changes your mind, develops a more positive mindset. You can't prove that it's working because you can't check up on it. You just have to do it. And then you have a wonderful experience when the baby is born.
Yeah. So one of my moms asked me this question, what would be, so I do have some fears and I'm already working on them, like with information, some of it becomes better. How do I cope with it? Like, what are the coping mechanisms? So I think right now you're talking about those coping mechanisms during labor.
Are we talking about fear or are we talking about pain now?
Fear and how to cope with it. If it becomes overwhelming and it tenses us up, something just pops up. And
well, I don't think it will be. I mean, sometimes a woman comes to me who's had a really traumatic first birth. She cannot believe that birth would be different.
Yeah.
And Or one of my teachers comes to me and says, I've got this woman who's come to me. What can I give her to deal with the fear? And I would always say, do the course. If when you've done the course, you still think you need something extra, then I will sit down with you and we'll do some extra work. But nobody has ever come back to me after they have done the course. I'm not saying that people totally forget any fear they might have, but it takes the sting out of it. The fear that wakes you up at 2 a.m. I know people who've had previous having a second baby might wake up in the middle of the night and they have this tightening in their tummy and they think, oh, now I remember what it's like. And they dig their husband in the ribs and say, I'm frightened. And he says, it'll be all right, and turns over and goes back to sleep. It's that sort of fear. And you can remember, you don't totally forget what fear you had, but it certainly takes the sting out of it and the power out of it. And it's no longer the focus of your subconscious mind. If that makes any sense.
It does. It does. Taking the sting out of it is really what we need to keep moving with the awareness of the fear, but still like working with it while we are in labor.
It certainly removes I would say it removes the pain of the fear, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And at some point you spoke about the water birth as well, that women go into water as a pain relief and they may or may not want to be in water. So what do you think about water births?
Giving birth in water, people say it's as good as having an injection of opioids. You can see a video of a woman getting into a birth pool and breathing's beginning to get heavy. And she gets into the pool and it's like, it really is. You combine, I know there are not many birth pools in India, but I'm sure there will be before too long. Because once a few women give birth like that and tell everybody else how wonderful it is, everybody else is demanding it from the hospitals and the clinics and the midwives and everybody. It is so much more comfortable. The advantages of giving in a birth pool is it's much more comfortable. You tend to be in a good position for giving birth because probably traditionally the position for giving birth was squatting. And most people don't feel very comfortable squatting these days because we tend to sit on chairs. But if you're kneeling in a birth pool, leaning on the side, your hips are in a similar position to squatting. Birth tends to be quicker in water. You're slightly less likely to tear. And I think psychologically it's very good because it's like you've got your own little nest. I'm safe, they can't reach me. It's like an animal, hides underneath the cupboard or something. Well, it's like that for women. They want to be in their safe place too, and a pool becomes your safe place. And it's good for the baby as well. Much more comfortable for the mother. And the baby has been inside in a fluid environment, rather not much space by the time it's ready to be born. And then it comes out into water of the same temperature as the fluid it was in inside. But it's got more space, and that's quite nice when you've been crushed up like that for a few weeks. And then mum's there and picks it up. And it must be the gentlest introduction to this world that you could possibly have. And many babies, when they're born in that way, don't cry. And people looking into videos say, well, why didn't the baby cry? Because in the movies, they're always screaming. And crying is a baby's communication, of course, and it usually needs to communicate when something's wrong. And it communicates very loudly when something's wrong. But when it's born in that way, there's nothing wrong, so there's nothing to talk about. It's the same temperature, mum's there, and if somebody else picks up that baby and sort of wipes it and says, welcome to the world, and then passes it to mum, it must be the longest few seconds of that baby's life. It must be terrifying, like being dropped on the moon without any explanation. And when mum's there, that's all right, because you know the rhythm of mum's breathing, you know the rhythm of mum's heart, you know mum's voice, you know dad's voice, and all those things are there. So it's all right.
Yeah. I was thinking while you were saying that it would also be for the mum a feeling of being in the womb, the way she was like in her subconscious, she was snuggled in the womb, taken care of, and there was
It could
pressure from
well
all
be,
sides.
yes.
Yeah.
Could remind her too.
Right, yeah. And when we often talk about fear, we talk about intuition alongside. So if you were to demarcate fear from intuition for our mums, what would you say to them?
Well, people sometimes say, oh, trust your instinct, it'll be all right.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good enough,
Uh-huh.
because we have very good brains. They're a wonderful tool. They can get in the way, but if you use them appropriately, they're a wonderful, wonderful tool. And we should be using our brains in pregnancy to get good information, to look at the facts, to look at what our choices are, which might not be presented to us by our caregivers, to the risks and benefits of the choices we might make. And we do that logically. We use our brains, and then we can make our choices and stick to those choices. But once we've done that, if it's all set up well like that, then when we go into labour, we can trust our instinct. But if we haven't set it up like that, and we get routine procedures that we hadn't really thought about, that somebody else thinks we ought to have and we haven't considered, then trusting your instinct is no good. You have to get good information first. You have to be strong and stick to it. And then you can trust your instinct, and birth can be wonderful.
Yeah. And when you say that, while you were saying that, I was thinking about you've been quite vocally supportive of home births. And the other day when I asked you this, you said, I'm supportive of birth. And apparently women have better birth experiences when they are home. So with respect to environment, how would you, like, is it important for women when they have their choices really laid out to really ensure the kind of experience they would want to have? But certain times what happens, things don't go a very similar route to how we've imagined, sometimes even at home or in the birth center or wherever they're thinking of birthing. How do they then use hypnobirthing to cope up?
You can use it in any circumstance and in any birth. I had my 4 children in a hospital because,
Yeah.
like most people, I thought, oh, you go to hospital to have your baby. I didn't really think at all. That's what people do. I wouldn't now, because in the 20 years I've been teaching hypnobirthing, I've seen lovely births in hospital, but I've seen ecstatic births at home. Because we're just, when it comes to birth, we're another mammal. And as we said before, every mammal goes to a small safe place that they know to give birth. Sometimes they might go to, if they're very close to their owner, they might even go to their owner because they trust them. But many women in the early stages of labour, in our homes, the small safe place is the toilet. And many, quite apart from, a woman might go there in early labour, not just because there's pressure on her bladder and she needs to use the toilet very frequently, but it is our small safe place. It's a private place where we go on our own. And plenty of women will want to go to the toilet, to the room, the toilet, not just to use the toilet. And many hospitals in the UK, and I don't know if it's like that in India, but I'm sure it will be, have what they call birth centres. And the rooms in the birth centres are more homely. They don't have a bed, they have a mattress, they have bean bags, they have a pool, they have low lights, facility for playing soft music. And basically they have made those rooms as much like home as they can. And why have they done that? Because home is best. And they're lovely, but it doesn't alter the fact that home is best. But I believe in India, apart from in sort of rural areas where you're too far to get to the hospital, everybody goes to hospital, don't they? Or am I wrong when I say that?
When there are rural areas where there isn't any facility, women are still birthing at home, but the government is trying to send everybody off to a hospital. We yet do not have the infrastructure, but we're trying to build it. Yeah.
But a midwife can't be sent out to a woman's home.
Yeah, there are local workers, like the government workers, so the women community workers, who who tie up women to the hospitals. That's how it's happening at the moment. But that's again
Yes.
yeah.
Isn't it funny? In the UK, it was in the 1960s, the Queen's obstetrician said, we must make provision for every woman to be able to give birth in hospital. He didn't say they should go into hospital. He just said we must have the provision. And that was when the massive movement into hospitals started. I mean, it started much earlier when drugs were available in hospital and that sort of thing. But there was another big movement to hospital in the 60s. And if anything, I think there is beginning of a trend possibly away from hospital now, because our system of birth is so over-medicalized and so many women are having traumatic births that if they've had that once, they say, never again, I'm going to have my baby at home. And I would imagine that in hospitals in India, the system is also over-medicalized. I mean, it's wonderful for all these things are there. We're really lucky they're there when they're needed, but not as much as they're used now.
Yeah.
I mean, induction of labour, I think worldwide is a pandemic. In the UK, it's over 50%. And if you included a stretch and sweep in that, it's probably up to 90%. It's absolutely dreadful. And that's what leads on to trauma. The World Health Organization says that if the C-section rate goes above 10 to 15%, we're not improving safety. And in the UK, it's well over 40%, possibly 50%. It varies from hospital to hospital. But if that's the case, 2/3 of the C-sections in the UK are not improving safely. And a lot of those result from an induced labour. And I did do a survey, it's a few years ago now, it was just before lockdown, into the KG Hypnobirthing mums, and their caesarean rate was half the national average. Now I need to do some more surveys into the induction rates and whether they tear and all this sort of thing. And we will do some more. And I know I've been saying that for a very long time, but we have one ready to go out possibly in October. And it's really important. We should be able to give women these good information.
Yes.
But it's time and money, isn't it? There's so many things to do.
Yes, absolutely. But as long as you're pushing for it, Katharine, I mean, it's incredible. And you've been in this work for 20 years. And I have another question before that. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how did you get into this work?
By mistake. Most of the things that happen in life are an accident, or they appear to be afterwards. I actually don't believe in coincidences. But I'm not a midwife. For 20 years, I've been immersed in the birth world, so I know quite a lot about it, as do you. But I came to it as a hypnotherapist, and it was just an extra that I added on to my hypnotherapy practice. And when I trained, I thought it was amazing, the training course. And I added it a lot as part of hypnotherapy. But the hypnotherapy has fallen by the wayside, and the hypnobirthing has taken over the whole of my life. And when I started, there were very few teachers in England, in the UK. And now there are a great many. People say to me now sometimes if they're training, well, it was easy for you because there weren't many teachers and there were lots of pregnant women, which is true in a way, but nobody had heard of it. So you were teaching this course with a funny name that nobody knew about. Whereas now, I think every pregnant woman in the UK gets to hear of it. Some midwives will tell them they ought to do it. So though there are more teachers, there are also more women wanting to do it. And you know, every woman needs it. It makes me so sad when a woman thinks it's an optional extra and she doesn't need it. And in the present economic climate we have in the UK, when everything is going downhill and people have to be very careful how they spend their money, something has to go. And actually, it is stupid when hypnobirthing is the thing that goes. You can understand it until somebody's done it. They don't know how important it is. But actually, it's the most important thing because it makes the most difference to their birth and it makes the most difference to their baby in how it starts in this world. It is so important. But you see, I could persuade women to do the course by scaremongering. But then I would be no better than the people who persuade them to have an induction by scaremongering. I will give logic. I will give examples. I will give reasons. And I hope they will see the logic.
Yes, and that brings me to read the topic. We are talking about fear, but if we go back and talk about the role of mind in birth, how important it is. It's often we speak about the physical aspect of pain. How do we work with the pain? The aspect of mind.
It's mind and body working together. When the breathing and the relaxations and the positive statements have been around for 70 years or more. So if they were enough, we'd never needed to do what we do now. But they're not enough. They're good, but they're not enough. Do you know the story of the princess and the pea in India?
No, I don't know.
I will tell you the story of it, the children's story. The princess couldn't sleep, even though she had the most beautiful bed, because there's a little pea underneath the mattress. And so what did they do? They gave her more mattresses. But she was so delicate that she still couldn't sleep because of that little pea under the mattress. And the pea is like the fear. Only when they removed the fear, the pea, could she sleep. And all those comfortable mattresses are like the breathing and the relaxation and the positive statements and everything else. Mm-hmm. But unless you remove the fear, they don't work in the way they might do. And when we're afraid, we produce different hormones. The hormone, from our point of view, mainly adrenaline. When we produce adrenaline, we produce it when we're frightened. And we produce it, if we meet a tiger, and all our heart starts to pump, and all our blood goes to our arms and our legs, ready to run away. And these powerful muscles of the uterus need a good blood supply to work well. Athletes collapse with cramp if they don't have a good supply. It's no wonder these muscles are painful. But when we feel confident and calm, we produce the hormone oxytocin. And because we're not frightened, we're not planning to run away from a tiger, all our blood supply stays in our internal organs, to these powerful muscles of the uterus so they can work well, and to our digestive organs so that we can digest food. And it's the nutrients and the oxygen which goes through the placenta to the baby, so the baby's better. Also, there are oxytocin receptors in the uterus. So when we're producing the hormone of calm, oxytocin, our uterine muscles are going to work better. And when we produce oxytocin in the brain, that triggers the hormone endorphins. Endorphins is nature's pain relief hormone. So when we're calm, we produce oxytocin that makes labour efficient because the oxytocin receptors in the uterus. And at the same time, we produce endorphins, which makes labour more comfortable. So it's a matter of mind and body working together in the way nature intended. And if you say to somebody, relax, you might sort of go, but it's amazing to really relax deeply, to really release all those fear thoughts. We have to practice. It doesn't just happen. I mean, it's okay if you do the course very late in your pregnancy because it's fresh in your mind. But really that 10 or 15 minutes a day practice, and you listen to audios, and it all has a cumulative effect. So that by the time you give birth, it's very powerful indeed. So it's how the mind affects the body. I put up something in Instagram a little while ago saying, well, it's not really the hormones that are important. It's not really the body that is important. It's the mind. Because the body doesn't do anything without the mind telling it to. So if the mind's giving the right message, the body is going to do the right things. But the body needs to practice too, of course. But it's mind and body working together in the way nature intended, and every woman is perfectly created. Her body is a shining diamond of perfection to give birth efficiently and comfortably. And what we have to do is get out of the way and let it work. get rid of the fears and the worries and the misconceptions and the assumptions, all this stuff that we've grown up with, we've been programmed with for the whole of our lives. So you can't just say, I'm not going to think that anymore. You really have to have a system to get rid of it, because the perfect situation is already created. But we have to get rid of the stuff that stops it working in the way it's designed to do.
Yeah. And that brings me to one of your talks where you spoke about us watching news. So one of your mums was a news reporter, a journalist or something, and it was her job to work with, like, she had to collaborate the news, and that would stress her out. And I think in the talk you were saying the first thing you can do is really...
What I would like every woman to do as soon as we have met, and I have taught her, or as soon as she's listened to the online course, is cut every negative out of her life. Now, the news is nothing but negatives. The weather forecast, well, at least in the UK, is nothing but negatives. She might have a husband who likes watching horror movies. I mean, there are parts of India where you might get him up in the morning and think it's wonderful if it's raining. You know, the monsoons come at last. Whereas in the UK, it rains a lot, and you get up in the morning and it rains and you think, oh, what an awful day. Well, it isn't an awful day. It's wet. And if you're always saying this is awful, that's negative, you're changing your hormones, and that affects your birth and your baby and its growth and your whole attitude to life. And I would ask every woman who does the course to surround herself in an impenetrable bubble of positivity until she's had a baby. She might like living like that so much, but she goes on like that. And the role for her husband, you know, a husband will say, what do I do? You know, he doesn't have to do anything, but he has to protect her from negativity. Maybe thousands of years ago, he was protecting her from the tiger at the mouth of a cave. But these days, the tiger is negative birth stories, negative thoughts, negative news, particularly the negative birth stories. So harmful. And women delight in telling them. And I think they tell them for two reasons. One is, if they've had a traumatic experience, they need to tell somebody. Somebody needs to listen, but not another pregnant woman. Or else they think, she's being naive in saying she's going to have a natural birth. I ought to tell her what it's really like. But since they know nothing about KG hypnobirthing, their opinion is not valid, and so it's irrelevant. For both reasons, cut negative birth stories out of your life. We have loads of positive birth stories on our website. You can read several every day if you want to, and that's really important, really important.
Yeah, it changes how the mind is now predisposed to labor and birth, and it gives a lot of encouragement to women. And what I wanted to ask next was intervention. So sometimes interventions are unavoidable. Like, it wasn't a part of the birth plan or the vision, but they might prop up.
Yes, that's what people always say. I hope to have a birth like this. They haven't planned properly. I think if I talked about the 80-20 rule, would you know what I meant?
No.
Well, I think possibly 80% of births don't go as planned and 20% do. But I think if you've done KG hypnobirthing, 80% do go as planned and 20% don't. Because you're well informed. Because, just take the pandemic of induction of labour, which is at about 50%, which leads to a great deal more problems very frequently. And the reasons, or apparent reasons, that a woman is given to agree to induction, most of them are not logical and not based on evidence. There are a tiny number of reasons where we can be very grateful that this help is available, but only a tiny number. And the sort of reason that a woman might be given, if you tell her there's a risk to her baby, she will agree to anything. If you don't agree to the induction, your baby might die, she'll agree. You don't have to give her logic, you don't have to give her statistics, you don't have to give her reason. People make the assumption that if you have a longer pregnancy, it's very, very risky. Now, it is true But the stillbirth rate increases with length of pregnancy, but only a tiny bit. It's still less than 0.1%. No, sorry. Yes, the increase is less than 0.1%. So, yes, it increases. Yes, it nearly doubles, but it's still under 0.2%. And nobody ever gives the woman the risks of agreeing to the induction. So, length of pregnancy is absolutely irrelevant. Big baby, women are frightened that they're going to have a big baby, and you don't actually know how big the baby is until after it's born. I understand that of 100 women who are told that it could be a big baby if they don't agree to the induction, 5 actually are big, and they're not necessarily enormous. And some people would say it's easier to give birth to a big baby because you have a nice uniform pressure of the head on the cervix. And certainly, babies of a longer gestation, once they're born, are more mature and ready for the world. They even might sleep better through the night, which must be an advantage. So, all these things that women are frightened with, when you look at the logic, there is very little logic. Now, for example, if a woman, gestational diabetes, that's another one. I'm not going to go on about that, but most of it is not true. On the other hand, if you have preeclampsia, true preeclampsia, that is a genuine concern for the health of the mother, and it makes sense to induce. But when you consider it, if you induce a baby, you're bringing it into the world before it's ready to be born, by definition. The last organ to be formed is the lungs. So if you induced a baby at, say, 39 weeks, but was planning to be born at, say, 43 weeks, you have deprived that baby of a whole month of its development. It is unlikely to have fully developed lungs. And the other organ, which is late in developing completely, is the brain. So effectively, you're making sure that this woman has a premature baby. Now, when you do an induction, you don't know if it's 2 days premature, which is obviously not very much, or if it's 4 weeks premature. We don't know. But that's a significant choice to make. It really is a significant choice to make, because up to that point, you're desperately trying to prevent babies being born prematurely because we know they're at greater risk. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Absolutely extraordinary when you look at it logically. And I'm sure you do too, because you think along those ways, don't you?
Absolutely. It's just, I think the textbooks and the research saying 38 weeks is term. So we think 38 weeks is term. But for some babies, 41 weeks can be term, which is like...
Or even 43 weeks.
43 weeks. So you're bringing the baby almost a month before they were supposed to be born. And that's terrible.
When people tell me their baby's late, I always say, well, late for what? If I'm late for an appointment, I know what I'm late for. What's it late for? And the other nice phrase that you can use, or a woman can use, my baby's going to be born on its birthday.
Yeah.
All babies are born on their birthday. Without fail, every baby is born on its birthday.
Yeah. There's another fear that has come in, and on the same lines, that what if I don't go into labor? And it's sad that some of the doctors here in India have also gone on to say that, oh, you don't produce as much oxytocin now, which is weird because you really got the baby in. Your body must have produced some oxytocin for that matter. But yeah, there is a genuine fear, and I've seen mums who fear that they might not go into labor, and they don't go into labor.
They can stop themselves. I can't stop it forever, but they can certainly delay labour by their state of mind. It is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, every baby gets born. It just does. It is quite extraordinary.
It is. And so if we have to explain, so when we talk about hypnobirthing, and when people come to me and when they speak about hypnobirthing, they always speak about visualizations and breath work, and that's about it. They think that's what hypnobirthing is. But how would you explain, with all your experience?
It is all those things, but they're only a small part of it. For breathing, the visualizations, the relaxations, and it's all presented in a very logical way, in a way that gives you all the tools you need, I would say that's about a quarter of the course. The first section before that is learning about how our bodies, our hormones, our muscles, our minds work. And I think the two most important things from that are the planning and the practice. Everything that's in life is important. We plan. But people don't plan their birth. They say, I'll see how it goes. They may do a birth plan, but it's probably a wish list, not a carefully researched plan. A good example of this is an athlete. However gifted the athlete, they don't just go into the stadium at the Olympics and hope to get a gold medal. They have been training, practicing for months, if not years, getting up early in the morning, running around the track or running around the roads. And they have a team with them. They have a trainer. They have a sports psychologist. They probably have a physiotherapist, a PR person, an admin person, somebody who advises them on nutrition, a whole team. So they get good information. And then they experiment with different running shoes, different race styles, different race strategies. So they plan and they practice. But when they go into the stadium, they're on their own.
Yeah.
And then they get the gold medal because of the planning and the practice. For the women who do our course, the gold medal is their fabulous birth and their beautiful baby. So those are the two first parts. The third part is learning how the maternity services work. Because the maternity services, as the World Health Organization has said, there's too much medicalization too soon. Nobody would say other than that it's wonderful that this help is there when it's needed, but it is desperately overused and used routinely. So we need to find out how the maternity services work in our particular country. They're very similar, in any hospital worldwide. There will be slight differences, but not very significant ones. We need to learn if there are any alternatives to the routine procedures that are offered, because if you just listen to the hospital, you tend to be funneled down the path of routine procedures. This is what we do. So you need to know what these procedures are. A woman will say, I'm going to be induced, I'm going to have my baby today. Well, they're not. They might wait several days before the induction ever even starts. It might take several days to happen. And at the end, they think, but nobody told me that. So they need to know any procedure, what it is, what it actually involves, what the outcome is likely to be. The biggest is the induction of labour because it leads to so many negative outcomes. But any procedure, a cervical check, there's no research done before it was started, and it tends to slow down labour, but nobody tells you that. So you need to know what the normal procedures are in the hospital you're going to. If you have a choice, and then you can make that choice, what the risks and benefits are of each procedure, so that she can make the choice which is right for her. And actually that section used not to be in the course, but there were so many questions that I added it to the course. And this is when the questions come pouring out, and maybe worries that a woman hadn't mentioned previously, suddenly she's asking questions about it. And it's possibly a part of a course which women don't expect to have. And afterwards, they say that was the most useful part. So it is, I don't know that it's the most useful, but it's certainly very useful, so they're well informed. And then the fourth part of the course is talking about how birth evolves and how you use these things at birth. So it's very logical progression. And the one thing that most women haven't thought about too is that precious hour after birth, which is called the third stage, sometimes called the golden hour, which I think is a much nicer name. And they haven't even thought about it. They've thought of giving birth to a baby. But for the baby, that hour, that first hour in this world is so important. And there are routine procedures that medicalize it. It's called a managed third stage, and it happens absolutely routinely. There are very few women who understand about the third stage of labour and understand the choices she makes. And she has a choice to have a physiological third stage. And there are very strong arguments for making that choice. But she doesn't even know she has a choice. She hasn't even thought about it. And I suppose it's not incredible because you think about having a baby. But thinking about that and learning what the alternatives are and the implications which could affect the baby for the whole of its life is massively important. And most women haven't even thought of it. So we do need to cover that too.
Yes, and sometimes it's a discovery that you have to birth your placenta as well. And then there's a baby on you and there's breastfeeding and all of that.
Yes.
Yeah. So before we wind up our conversation, it has been really interesting to go back and forth to all the wonderful aspects of birth which women should be aware of and should know that they should dig deeper into.
Yes.
I wanted to also, I'm very curious to ask you, what changes have you seen from your time in the hospitals when you gave birth to now?
Oh, some things were better, some things were worse. I mean, when I had my first baby, fathers weren't allowed in. When I had my other three, they were. So things were already changing. All of them, I gave birth lying in bed. Whereas now, every midwife knows that that's the least efficient and most uncomfortable position for giving birth. Fortunately, I didn't have my legs in stirrups. But I can remember saying to a midwife, I want more cushions. I just wanted to get... And she said, there aren't any. So that was worse. There weren't any epidurals, which you might consider better and you might consider worse. But I can't recall anybody who was induced of my friends. So it's the inductions which caused the more painful births. So yes, there was gas and air and narcotics. There weren't any scans, which the midwife felt with her hand. And midwives are wonderful what they can feel with their hand. And people will say now, I didn't believe I was pregnant till I could see my baby. And there are advantages to scans, but my goodness, there are a lot of disadvantages and risks to scans which no woman has ever told. I have never seen a hospital which explains to a woman before she has a scan the risks and benefits of a procedure. They say, these are the scans we do, and this is what we want to find out. They never explain the risks and benefits, which we do in the course because women ought to be well informed. So there weren't any scans, which there were some bad things about that, undoubtedly, but quite frankly, I think there were more benefits than risks to not having scans. So I think those were the main things. I mean, I was very young when I had my first baby because women then were having their babies younger. But I had my first baby in about 6 to 8 hours. I was flat on your back in bed. But it was so much less medicalized. Scans can cause stress and worry, and they can give false positives, more false positives than false negatives, and that's really worrying. So it was a much less medicalized procedure. I only knew one friend who had a cesarean, because a cesarean was a much bigger operation with a major incision down the abdomen and a general anaesthetic, whereas these days it's a small incision on the bikini line and a spinal block. So far less medicalized, which is, okay, occasionally you miss something that would have been picked up. From my point of view, it was definitely a benefit. And there are some risks. But that's the downside of it. There were more risks, I suppose. The lack of medicalization. But because I was young, I mean, nobody thought to research birth, partly because there wasn't the internet. So if you had to research, you would have to have read all sorts of midwifery books or something. So you basically just trusted what the doctor said, which, since there was less medicalization, was possibly less intrusive than it would be these days. But there is this constant battle between the medicalization, and we have to remember that all the research, which may say that some intervention is justified, all that research is done in a medical environment. So it is slanted before you even look at it. No research is done into things that aren't going to make money for the drug companies. So the research is sort of slanted. It's good to have more evidence, but you need to bear that in mind, the way the evidence was collected as well. I hope I've explained.
I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved. And did you have no scans, like no scans?
Well, I don't think there were. Whether there you could have one if you were considered at high risk, but I never had a scan. Midwives are incredible at feeling with their hands. They're very, very seldom. I mean, obviously they can't feel some things, but for example, position of the baby. And I trained a sonographer once as a mum in KG Hypnobirthing, and she said, I cannot believe the number of women being sent for a scan weekly. Nothing is going to change. Now, admittedly, when you get beyond 40 weeks, there is a strong argument for having a scan to check that the baby's fine, to check that the blood's flowing from the placenta. And it puts a mother's mind at rest, and it proves effectively that she doesn't need an induction. I'm not saying that all scans are dreadful, but I am saying they do have their risks, and they are much overused.
And in your time, like you went to 41st week, was there any capping or tap at the number as well? Like, did you have to remember your due date or something? Were you even given a due date back then?
Yes, you had a due date, but you worked it out from the first day of your last period. Whereas these days it comes from your 12-week scan. And I've found, and this is not a research statistic, but it's just my observation, that the scan more often, not always, but more often gives a mother an earlier due date than when she worked it out from the first date of her last period. So that's the date the hospital will take. That's the date where they start saying you ought to be induced. Whereas for many women, probably more, the one she worked out for herself was later. But the hospital don't believe that one. They believe machines.
Yes, so sad. I'm so grateful, Katharine, for you to have come on board to share everything about hypnobirthing with our audience and to speak about all the important aspects of birth, like induction, ultrasounds. And I think we've pretty much covered all the important aspects of birth.
I hope so. We'll probably think about something afterwards, but we won't think about it now. So.
Yeah.
I've had such a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
There is a field beyond fear, where the body is empowered to take on labor and birth. To land there, it is crucial to take birth education. To enroll into our unique labor and birth preparation course, reach out to us at www.birthagni.com or scroll through all available prenatal and postnatal preparation classes. Thank you for listening, all in the spirit of birth, womanhood, and freedom. Remember, you got the power. This podcast is about physiological birth and does not offer or claim to provide medical knowledge or diagnosis. Starting a podcast with poor recording tools in the market? It was painful until I found Zencastr. Its high quality audio and video recording, along with the option of a backup, makes it super sturdy and a savior at times. With an easy to use dashboard and super convenient tools for advertising campaigns such as reels and videos, Zencastr is my comfort choice. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code BIRTHAGNI, BIRTHAGNI, and you will get 30% off of your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. You may also explore their free hobbyist plan to begin with.